What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. It's Friday, we've got the weekend ahead of us, so let me know down below what you're going to be playing this weekend. I think if you've been watching this past week for Newswave, you know what I'm going to be playing. Phantasy Star Online 2, so I'll definitely be checking that out and giving some impressions over the weekend for that one. As for today, though, we have a bunch of things to go over, which includes Nintendo's response to the Animal Crossing save backup issue, where there are all kinds of problems around backing up your island and even moving it from one system to the other. Nintendo has responded. We'll go over that today. Also, Ubisoft, they've had some issues recently as well, but it looks like at least for this next year, it is going to be a lot of stuff going on. And if you're a big fan of what Ubisoft puts out, you're going to be pretty excited to hear about all the stuff happening in the next year for them. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're brand new here, make sure you subscribe down below if you want to keep up to date on all the gaming news going on in the gaming world. We're going to start today with the Wonderful 101 remaster. Of course, the Kickstarter is wildly successful in its first few days. It looks like they will hit that $1.5 million mark without any real issue at all within the first week of this thing being live. So it's exciting stuff there, especially if you wanted to see Wonderful 101 come over and go to current gen platforms. It's good to see this. And of course, when it hits that $1.5 million, there will be new content that is added as a stretch goal. And people were wondering about performance and resolution. And if you go through some of the frequently asked questions they have posted, you can actually see this passage here that tells us that for portable mode, it'll be 720p, dock 1080p. They are targeting 60 frames per second completely for the Switch. For the PS4, it'll be the same deal for the base at 1080p, 60 frames. And then for the PS4 Pro, they're going to target apparently 4K 60 frames per second. That is pretty cool. And then even on Steam, they're going to offer super wide monitor support. Also, of course, targeting 60 frames. We'll see if they eclipse that any further. And of course, for any high refresh monitors and, series video cards, maybe you can push the upper limits of frame rate. But good to see this, as the Wii U version was 720p and frame rate that would kind of get all over the place when a lot of stuff was happening on screen. So good to hear. We'll have hopefully a smooth and much cleaner looking game when it comes out in April. Also, are you a Ninja Gaiden fan? Have you been hoping for a Ninja Gaiden game? Because I have, and it seems like Team Ninja knows that we really would like to see another one. After 3, I wasn't as sold on 3. I liked the first one, obviously, on the original Xbox. It's backwards compatible now, of course, on the Xbox One, and it's on Game Pass, so you can grab Ninja Gaiden Black right off of there. And then I like the second one a lot. That's probably my favorite one currently. And it looks like, they hear us for another one. In an interview with IGN, this is what they had to say. The core members of the team that worked on Ninja Gaiden want to make a new game, and this is from Yasuda over at Team Ninja. We are aware that some fans wanted Ninja Gaiden more than Nioh 2, that would be me, but Nioh 2 I'm sure will still be very good. Now we see a lot of Ninja games like Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice as well, and we see a lot of good inspirations in those games, so we hope to deliver some good news one day. And you know what? I actually believe that they are working on a Ninja Gaiden game in some way, whether it's conceptually, like they have concept art, all drawn up, or they have the storyboarding done. I do think they are working on another Ninja Gaiden. I think we will see another one at some point, maybe for next generation platforms, maybe in a few years, but the fact that they are still talking about Ninja Gaiden gives me hope that a fourth one could come out and redeem, I think, that third one. Go back to more like the Ninja Gaiden 2. That, again, is my favorite one so far. And yesterday we just talked about, of course, Rod Ferguson leaving the Coalition, going to Blizzard, leaving the Gears of War franchise kind of in question, specifically about leadership and a few other things. Well, it looks like Cliff Blezinski on Twitter must have heard this and had seen some of the people kind of talking about what's going to happen with Gears of War, because he posted this on Twitter saying that the offer still stands to consult on the Gears franchise, Microsoft. Your move. Now, of course, Cliff was lead designer for Gears of War 1, 2, 3, so he's very familiar with the Gears franchise, and consulting wouldn't necessarily mean that he would be there all the time. I assume consulting wouldn't be a full-time thing. More or less, he would kind of give some insight and some ideas, and someone else would, of course, be the lead on the project for the next Gears of War. And Yeah, I mean, I don't think it could hurt, really, although Lawbreakers didn't work out great. I think Cliff does have a mind for, like, the more action-oriented Gears of War style cover-based game. I think he would be fine with that, especially consulting, because that means he wouldn't be making, like, the final decisions on anything, just giving his input, some insight on some of the ideas that they may have and how they can maybe shape that a bit better for the Gears franchise. I don't think it would hurt, and I think it'd be a good idea for Microsoft to do that. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start with this Animal Crossing, this whole situation. It's been going on for this past week. It's been a developing story with new information coming out pretty constantly, especially as we get closer to its release, as I would expect. I do still think we'll get a direct of some kind, and there might be something to keep an eye out for in that direct, as Nintendo updated their website like almost around the time of Newswave going live yesterday morning, talking about a bit more information coming out for the Animal Crossing save backup situation around your one island and not being able to transfer locally between different systems. Well, Nintendo updated on February 6th. This is what they had to say. This software does not support save data storage of Nintendo Switch Online, but in case of failure, loss, or theft of the Nintendo Switch body in the original form of this software, we are considering a function to back up save data. Use of this function is limited to Nintendo Switch Online subscribers. Correspondence time is undecided. We will notify you as soon as the time is decided. That, of course, was done through good old Google Translate on their own website that Nintendo has set up for more information about Animal Crossing, and it does kind of seem like they weren't necessarily planning it before, and now they're like, oh, maybe we should do some way to back up your island and your information in Animal Crossing. Now, we already know they've pretty much set this up to where there will be one island per system, and any profiles that are made will just use that one island, and then everyone just kind of works together or against each other, I guess, if you have brothers or sisters or whoever, friends that are going to sabotage your island. It can go either way. Trust me, I've seen it myself with the GameCube, right? But the ability to back up your stuff is still, I think, important for a lot of people, especially if you're going to spend possibly years playing Animal Crossing New Horizons. It would make sense that you would want to make sure your island is not lost if your system fails, it's stolen. They kind of outline it here, right? So the question now becomes, how would they do this? Because I'll admit, it sounds like they're not even 100% sure yet, unless they do have an idea and they just have not shown it off yet. Maybe that's what that direct is for, where they will show us that in the menu system, there is a place to go to back up your save, and Mr. Rossetti helps you out with it. I think that'd be cool. Have Mr. Rossetti be the character that shows up when it's time to back up your island, and he gives you a whole spiel about how you're not supposed to turn the system off while it's backing up, or he'll find you, all of this kind of stuff. I think that'd be fun to have Mr. Rossetti do that. And the big reason for this, I guess, is that it's not the same type of save file that you would have for other games where those are locked to your profile. This just appears to be locked to the main system itself. It appears to be just designed differently, right? It's one save, everything is tied to it for all of the different profiles, so maybe it has to go through the game with a different type of backup method for Nintendo to recognize that island being backed up somewhere. It could technically still go to the same, servers and stuff they have set up. It just has to be able to recognize that it's the island from Animal Crossing, and maybe they have to go through a menu system and do that in the game. I do like that they are at least looking at this, because this was updated on the 6th of February. But I do wonder if maybe the Australian website wasn't updated the way it was to talk about how it's even more restrictive, and then we get a look at the back of that German download code, and now it's become even more restrictive. If they would have put this statement out, or maybe they would have revealed a way to back up your island, it would be it'd be interesting to see if they had this plan. I almost feel like they don't, just because they weren't able to describe much more here. It's good to at least see that Nintendo hears the fans and the fan base for Animal Crossing, and it's good to, it kind of reminds me of that Super Mario Maker 2 situation where people really let Nintendo know, hey, we want to have matchmaking with friends. It seems weird that you can't do any of this stuff, and they eventually responded and tried to work all of that out. So here's hoping they work out all this stuff with Animal Crossing for everyone who wants to be able to back up their saves. Next up, let's talk about Ubisoft. Of course, we know they had to start pushing stuff back. Watch Watchdog Legions, for example, was supposed to be coming out in March, right? We saw it at E3. That was like their big thing at E3, and it got pushed back to who knows when. We'll find out more about that soon. But they did have their financial briefing, their investors called all of this, and they kind of outlined their plan going forward, at least up until April of next year. And it looks like they're going to have a ton of big budget games, because they still use the term, of course, AAA games. They're going to have 5 of them that all come out before April 2021, and we kind of know what they all are now. Now, originally, we know, of course, about 3 of them. There's the new Rainbow Six Quarantine game, there's Watch Dogs, and then there's Gods and Monsters. And that one actually looks pretty interesting because it's different looking, at least, from the typical Ubisoft formula that we have gotten used to with a lot of the climbing towers and finding points on the maps, and they're all really far apart. And right, we get that formula. But it looks like the other 2 would be an Assassin's Creed and another Far Cry game, as you see here with the tweet from Jason Schreier, who is saying, Splinter Cell fans, don't get your hopes up. Yeah, it's a shame, because I would like to see another Splinter Cell game, but it seems for now Ubisoft has all of this in mind. Now, they have 3 of those games slated to come out basically in the holiday period coming up before December 2020. So sometime between October and December, they're going to have 3 of these games launch. So most likely you'll have an October, a November, and a December game, all from Ubisoft. I'm wondering if that'll be too crowded for them, considering they like their games to be very much service-based style games, but maybe something like Gods and Monsters isn't as crazy service-based as something like, I don't know, a Watch Dogs, right? Maybe it's not as crazy in terms of how long they want you to play it for, and they won't get too crowded there. I think you'll probably see Rainbow Six, then you'll see Watch Dogs, then you'll probably see Gods and Monsters, most likely in that order as an October, November, December release. But then we have to consider, okay, then we run into something like Far Cry, and then will Assassin's Creed be a title that ends up in April or even March? It's something to think about there. But you also have to consider, they didn't say a thing about Beyond Good and Evil 2, and that should concern everyone, especially fans of Beyond Good and Evil. This game just disappeared. You figure that's gotta be a game with a budget like a AAA game, with how long they're taking on it and the scope that they have kind of outlined for it, but nothing about it. I guess it really is a next-gen title at this point, and maybe they are just like, we're pretty much gonna pass up the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 and go into the PS5 and the Series X, because if this thing doesn't launch until next holiday, like 2021, I don't see why they would put it on the PS4 and the Xbox One, because you figure the Series X and the PS5 would have at least built somewhat of an install base, and I assume developing for that VCR would have them run into some issues with something like Beyond Good and Evil 2 if they push it hard for the Series X and the PS5. But if you're a fan of Ubisoft games, you'll have a pretty good year, I would say, with all of these big ones coming out: an Assassin's Creed, a Watch Dogs, Rainbow Six, Gods and Monsters, which again looks pretty interesting. No Splinter Cell though, so maybe next year, or actually no, the year after. We're talking into 2021 here, so couple E3s from now, maybe we'll finally see Sam Fisher show up on something that's not your mobile phone. Next up, let's talk about some delays and, issues with stock for the Switch, and then even the Outer Worlds that's being ported by Virtuos and the private division, which is publishing it. We're going to talk a bit about that one in a second. Let's actually move over to Nintendo, where they posted on their website with an apology, and this is what they had to say. Due to the new coronavirus infection that is currently occurring, it is expected that production and shipment delays will be inevitable for peripheral devices such as the Nintendo Switch and Joy-Con manufactured in China for the Japanese domestic market. Similarly, shipments of the current out-of-stock Ring Fit Adventure are expected to be delayed. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. Now, this does appear to be mostly an issue with stock in Japan, as they have moved some of their manufacturing outside of China for, I believe, places like Vietnam. I think they looked at places also like Taiwan and others. So there are other places that they have moved manufacturing to, and those have actually been kind of routed to places like the US and others. So I don't know if stock will be an issue outside of places like Japan, which seems to be the most affected here. And of course, you've probably seen the coronavirus in the news, that it's it's really spread in China, and that's where a lot of these factories and offices and other places are, and a lot of them being shut down. because of this going on right now. So yeah, it makes sense that they would have to shut that stuff down, and it's very important outside of just video games. Obviously, when you have a disease and a virus like that spreading, it makes sense. I think most people understand. And then it actually goes further than that. Virtuos, just offices and studios in China as well, and this is what the private division posted on Twitter. We're delaying Outer Worlds on Nintendo Switch due to the coronavirus impacting the Virtuos team working on the port to provide them enough time to finish development. We'll now be releasing the physical version on cartridge. Once we have a new launch date, we'll let you know. So we're not going to be looking to see it next month anymore. But remember, before, it was just going to be like a piece of paper in the box that you would punch the code in and just download. Now it looks like they're going to go full on and have a cartridge and everything. It's obviously an issue with the coronavirus spreading right now. So to me, it makes sense that you want to make sure everyone is safe and protected as best as they can be as they try to contain the outbreak right now of this disease. So all of that to me makes sense, and we'll just have to wait for the Outer Worlds whenever it's ready. Honestly, it'll probably, let's say it moves into the summer or like early fall or like the fall or something. To me, that's not a big deal for what's really going on, obviously, in the world right now. So we'll wait for it. And hey, I mean, I guess it also will now be on a cartridge. I'm curious how they made that jump. Maybe they just get more time. I'm not really sure. But we'll see what happens there and see when the new release date is. But I guess there's a cartridge coming for the Outer Worlds. If you were someone who was frustrated with it being a piece of paper, you can look forward to a cartridge now. And hopefully everyone in China, Virtuos, everyone around the world can stay safe with the coronavirus, hopefully being contained soon. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about PAX East that is taking place at the end of this month, February 27th, all the way to March 1st. So we'll get a nice good weekend there out of it. And we've been wondering places where PlayStation will show up since they say they're not going to E3. They could still hold an event on their own around E3, which I think a lot of us expect them to do that. But they did say they were going to go on tour and still make their way out to other places like PAX East. And we did have the floor plan released, and we can see just that. You can see this here. Actually, some of the bigger booths on this floor plan do include Square Enix, by the way, so I expect them to be there with Final Fantasy VII Remake, so if you're going to PAX East, maybe you can get a chance to play it, which would be really, really cool. Nintendo has a very large booth as well, which is a place that I think a lot of people are expecting to see at least Animal Crossing on display, maybe even playable, and then you never know what else they could have there. There could even be a direct, we assume, in February before PAX East, and maybe they have some more playable games as well. All of that would be really cool to see. And then right across from Nintendo are several different PlayStation booths, and that'll be an interesting one to see what PlayStation would show up there with. Maybe they just have literally just PlayStation 4 systems. Maybe they have something playable for Last of Us Part 2. That would be really, really cool to see. I don't think Ghost of Tsushima will be playable there, as we're still waiting for a solid release date for it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had something, like I said, like a Last of Us Part 2, and maybe just other PlayStation 4 games as they are doing like their PlayStation Experience Tour, and they literally just set stuff up for people to play. But it does look like, from what we're seeing here with the PAX East floor plan, there's gonna be a lot of stuff to see. So if you're going, make sure you have a good time there, and hopefully don't stand in line too long so you can see everything. Make the rounds and check out what everyone has. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This one's from the Casual Canuck saying, "I really think Microsoft is jumping the gun in terms of gaming. Streaming may be the future, but the current internet infrastructure isn't the same all across the globe. Not everyone has the ability for those speeds or data caps. Just plain wall them from streaming services." So the issue here, well, the big thing here is Microsoft wants to get out in front of this because they do see game streaming eventually, I say eventually, years, even up to a decade from now, being the default. Like, that's what a lot of people, not everyone, of course, because you'll still have people like me plugging the GameCube and the Nintendo 64 and stuff in, right, to play that. But for the most part, they believe that we will eventually get there to where Comcast, which, excuse me while I laugh, right, where Comcast will catch up and provide solid internet speeds across pretty much the US. Again, I'll believe that one when I see it, right? Or even Verizon or other providers, and they give us fair rates. I'm doing a lot of laughing here, right? But the idea here is that game streaming is not there yet, but it will be eventually. And all these companies are fighting now to literally be the default, the company you think of when you think of game streaming. That's what they're trying to do, and that's why they're starting so early. We're not there yet, but someday we will, and eventually people will look around and say, well, I want to get on the latest game streaming service. Oh, wait, Microsoft is the game streaming company. I'll go with them. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. Enjoyed this video, guys. Hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's Nintendo responding to the Animal Crossing save backup situation that's been going on for a while now, but it really started to ramp up this past week. Do you think they heard the concerns from the fan base as we got closer to release and they were working to kind of solve the issue, or do you think they had a solution figured out this whole time and they're waiting to tell us in a direct? Curious about that one. And then what about Ubisoft's kind of their calendar year going forward here, where they're expecting to push out quite a bit of content towards the back end of this year? Gods and Monsters is still the interesting one for me to look forward to, but maybe you're looking forward to Watch Dogs or even the next Assassin's Creed. Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time for Newswave.